Ariadne Eldir is the heiress of the Duke of Eldir. Despite her beauty, she was only a minor character that died before the novel even began. But her destiny changed the very moment she was born, making Ariadne obliged to survive at all costs. The girl was looking thoughtfully out the window of her luxurious mansion, when at the same moment she was called by a servant when it was time for her to go. Ariadne, accompanied by a servant, walked along a corridor studded with royal wealth and splendor. On the surface she was silent and obedient, but in reality she was running through her head with an escape plan that she had an unprecedented chance at. But suddenly her thoughts were interrupted by voices coming from one luxurious room, the door of which was ajar. A young man and a bearded old man in expensive robes were having a heated discussion about a girl with excellent magical abilities who had died. The younger man says that they had a love affair and that she died at the hands of monsters. But from the old man, Arya hears a cry that he was obliged to save the girl at any cost. Continuing to tearfully deny his guilt, the young man confesses that his beloved once said that if she died she would not be worthy to be a holy virgin. The man is deeply despondent and says he will never forgive himself, but the old man is still disgusted by him. Suddenly the maid slams this very room shut, to which Ariadne asks her if those two were talking about her mother. The TA, calmly taking the girl's hand, waves her off, reminding her of the Duke's busyness for which they will have to wait a bit. Solon Garcia is the same bearded old man, the grandfather of the main character, who is a very talented magician that received the title of the Great Mage of the Empire. Because of the girl's father, Ariadne's mother became pregnant early, which made the powerful mage hate him so much that he disowned his own daughter. It was only after learning of her death that the old man returned 8 years later. The girl's implication is that Solon is just as he was in the novel, as he doubts his daughter's death. Dark memories came over the girl, making her clutch the fabric of her dress nervously in her hand. In them, her mom bursts into the room, running fearfully up to her daughter and looking at her wrists, which were covered in scratches and bruises. Her mother explains to Arya that she should not be trained in such a way, to which the girl is surprised, because her father, on the contrary, made her learn. Mom, from whose eyes tears have sprung, promises Ariadne that she won't let her go through this again. She hugs her daughter, apologizes to her. In the next flashback, Arya, while in Daddy's arms, asks him where Mommy is. Dad nonchalantly replies that she is away on a trip, and adds that if she does well, she will tell you where she is. The girl, fired up by this opportunity, eagerly agrees, which brings genuine smiles to both of them. Snapping out of her memories, Ariadne concludes with a peculiar sadness on her face that she will endure the hardships no matter what it costs her. Meanwhile, the waiting time has come to an end. The girl and her maid have a chance to enter. The grandfather wishes to see his granddaughter. Walking into the room, Arya was still thinking about her perfect chance, which was reflected in her stilted and stern mood. But as soon as the girl's father introduced Arianda to her grandfather, that stiffness was blown away as if by the wind. The sweet blue-eyed girl stood before the men, her face lighting up with a smile. Papa wanted to introduce his daughter with dignity, naming her age, which was her 7th year, but Solon interrupted him, for he already knows. In the not-long silence, the old mage frowned his eyebrows at the girl, contemplating her sky-colored eyes and blonde hair that was a carbon copy of her father's. Ariadne bowed elegantly before her grandfather and appeared to read his mind. He was thinking about her not being like her mother, which made him very angry. Solon waved his hand and ordered his granddaughter to come closer to get a good look. But then the young heroine remembers that it was at this point in the novel that she became frightened and threw herself into her father's arms. Because little kids can sense when people don't like them and when they don't, because according to the novel, Grandpa hated her. Perhaps the protagonist would do the same now, but she knows the plot of the novel. The father wanted to curb his daughter's behavior, but she slipped out from under his arm at the last moment. Mustering up the courage before that very chance, the girl grabs hold of the great mage's cloak. Solon, who had not expected such harshness, raised his hand up as if about to throw the child away. But Arya desperately begs her grandfather to take her with him. She thinks that even though he hates her, she'll be much better off with him than with her father. The girl still clings to her grandfather. In her thoughts, she begs him to take her away from her father. Devoki's dad gently touches her shoulder, reminding her then that he had already explained how to behave in front of guests. Ariadne had already lost all hope of escape when her dad started trying to pull her away from her grandfather. However, at that moment, Grandpa Solon ordered his father to stop. He kindly asks his granddaughter if she is really that eager to go with him. The girl, in whose heart hope has reappeared, confirms everything with a smile, and the old man, stroking Arya's head, decides that she is allowed to go with him. The grandfather and granddaughter held hands and were about to leave when the father started the argument again. Ariadne must not leave. She has a weak body. Trouble might happen to her. Solon in turn argues that nothing terrible will happen to her, and such her desire is argued by the fact that they have not seen each other for a long time. However, the father insists on doing his own thing. Convinced that the old man is not going to give in to him, he decides to use force. By shouting, he forces his daughter back. No action followed his order. Solon Garcia, casting a menacing glance at him, reminded the boor in coarse language which of the two of them bore the title of Grand Mage. Frightened by such rudeness, my father still continued his opera about reporting my grandfather for kidnapping, to which he didn't care at all. The Grand Mage and his grandson left the room, listening to his father's screams behind them. Already in the carriage, the girl gazes at her castle, from which she is gradually moving away. She can't believe she got away so easily. The Grand Mage interrupted the silence between them, wondering what his granddaughter was so scared of and clinging to. The girl herself recalls that in the novel, her grandfather hates her, and this issue is not supposed to be in the script. Ariadne is surprised by her grandfather's gentleness enough to start crying. Not knowing why she was crying, she tried to stop, but she couldn't. Solon notices his granddaughter's sad mood and hugs her, letting her emotions pour out. In her grandfather's arms, Arya sighed heavily before bursting into tears throughout the carriage. According to the novel, Ariadne Eldir, heiress to the Duke of Eldir, could not become a saint despite her power and died at the age of 16. Arya learned this fate of hers when she turned 7 years old. Time is transported back to Eldir's father's castle. He, on the other hand, is in his office examining some vials with an unknown liquid. He turns back and glances at his daughter, who sits nervously in a chair as if waiting to be tortured. She shudders, dousing herself with sweat in 7 paths. Her father notices this and tells her not to worry. He won't do anything dangerous. Duke Eldir bends over his daughter, burying his hand in her hair, causing Ariadne to cry out as if mutely. A vial encrusted with expensive stones pours out a violet-colored liquid. Arya tries to stop her dad. She's scared and in pain. She closes her eyes and, as if in a dream, stops moving. It was as if reality had shattered into shards. Suddenly, Arya begins to gain consciousness, more like a stream of illusions. She remembers her name, the world she lives in, but not all the puzzles fit together. Other than that, she still remembers some other life where there is no magic, modern houses, and smartphones. It comes to her attention that she sees her past life where she was an ordinary 28-year-old girl. But a sudden white light illuminated everything around her, and Ariadne found herself in the same magical world, in a luxurious library. She walks over to the shelf of books, picks up the first one she sees, and notices that she has already read this book about fairies in her past life. Next, she decides to examine another shelf of books, and also concludes that everything in here she has read in a past life. Ariadne Eldir realizes that she has fallen into her library of memories from her past life. She notices another shelf with a row of books in the same series. Taking out one of the parts of the novel, she opened the book and looked at the pages. Running her eyes over the letters, she notices something she clearly didn't expect to see there. Her name, Ariadne Eldir. She recalls the plot of a novel with her name on it that she had already read in a past life. Axel Valentine is the main character who can go back in time and tried to save the world from an invasion of demonic beings. But despite his best efforts, the world fell. It was filled with snakes that sprawled over thousands of bones. The novel, according to the protagonist, ended meaninglessly. Having read from the book words about a certain Franz Eldir, who had 2 children, the girl remembers that Ariadne Eldir did not live long. This saddens her, and she is left to just accept. Except that she is the Ariadne of this world. The girl reads a paragraph about Franz and learns that his biological daughter Ariadne Eldir died at the age of 16, and he had to designate his second child, adopted daughter Helen Eldir, as his heir. Everyone thought Helen was a genius, however. She was using the wrong power that belonged to her. She used the Holy Maiden technique to heal the soul. It was only through the artifacts that the Duke had made that she was able to become a spirit lord. The last lines about the Holy Maiden's technique and artifacts interested the girl greatly. She considered the book even more carefully. Aria discovers she is barely mentioned in the novel and that she is now the one playing the role. With these thoughts, the girl notices her hand full of scratches. Tears roll down Aria's eyes. It pains her to realize that she ended up at such a young age. In the background, the girl remembers that torture with her father, and thanks to the past life she saw in the dream, it comes to her that such love from her father is not normal. Such memories hit a thin string of the protagonist, her tears dropping onto the pages of the book. Staring at the scratches on her arm, she can't understand how anyone could do such a horrible thing to her own daughter. But suddenly she recalls another detail, namely, her dad once told her that her mom was supposedly away on a trip. This scares her because she guesses that in fact her father just killed her mother, which means that if he killed her, he can kill his own daughter. The girl's courage takes over. Having decided that her father is very dangerous, she vows to herself that she will find out the truth and change the ending of this novel at any cost. Time returns to where a little granddaughter cries in her grandfather's arms. The old man orders the guides to drive faster, and the carriage pulls up to an expensive castle with a marvelous garden and fountain covered with snow. There were two people in one of the rooms of the castle, an expensively dressed man sitting at an office desk and his servant standing next to him with papers. The latter notices in the window a visiting carriage with the Grand Wizard, of which he notifies his master. Toth notes that the mage has returned earlier than he expected. Going through papers at his desk, the gentleman complains that he himself is personally investigating the death of his daughter, Gloria, even though it is already being investigated. The servant, in his turn, announces another news. Magician Solon has not arrived alone. The Lord wanted to interrupt him, but all was interrupted by a sharp cry as his father called out to his son, for his granddaughter was about to die. The Lord did not believe his father's words about his granddaughter at first, so the servant explained to him that Solon had a sole heir, Ariadne elixir. The son of the great magician refuses to believe that his father has brought his granddaughter with him, for he needs no one but him. But suddenly he begins to pile on that the father has forcibly taken his daughter away from her father, as a result of which he is completely distraught. The magician's son did not hesitate to get up from his chair, put his cloak on his back, and hurried to his father. The girl, meanwhile, regains consciousness in a room that is completely unfamiliar to her, which surprises her greatly at first. She guesses she passed out in the carriage. Trying to remember how much sleep she had gotten, she lifts herself out of bed. One of the maids enters the room with a towel in hand and a basket in her hands. She is glad the lady is awake. Ariadne, due to her condition, pays no attention to her. Instead, she tries to get out of bed, which she fails and falls over. But the nimble servant holds back, reminding her that she shouldn't be overdoing it too much right now. She puts Aria back on the bed, covers her up, and offers to light the fire so she won't catch a cold. But it's as if the girl doesn't hear her words. She looks at her with mesmerizing eyes, wanting to say something. The servant, still smiling, interrupts her, thinking the little lady needs something. At this moment, the girl realizes that no one has ever smiled at her in such a friendly way, because the Duke's servants do not even look her in the eye. Interrupting her silence, the lady asks the servant what that one's name is, to which the one with a protruding blush on her cheeks replies that her name is Lucy. The girl once again marvels at the kindness in her direction, which just makes a thoughtful "Lucy" come out of her lips, to which the servant instantly responds with a blinding smile. Ariadne, too, is beginning to be glad that at least someone is smiling at her. Lucy, noticing her mistress's smile, is pleased that she feels in good health and admits that she was worried about her. But the smile is momentarily gone from the girl's face when she realizes she doesn't remember how long she slept. It is at this moment that the son of the great magician bursts into the room and shoutingly asks if Ariadne is awake. He was so interested in his question that he didn't notice the healer scolding himself and trying to squeeze into the room. The mage's son, noticing his embittered mood, sarcastically lets the doctor pass, causing him to stumble. Once in the room in front of the lady, the doctor first decides to introduce himself, smiling politely and adjusting his glasses. But the girl was not happy about it. She recognizes the doctor's coat and remembers that she has already seen it on another man who served her father. These memories make Aria shiver like the cold. With fear, she grabs the collar of the servant Lucy. But she says it's okay, it's just the doctor. The doctor notices the primal fear of the girl, who is terribly reluctant for him to even come close to her. The girl can't calm down, despite Lucy's support. Arya realizes that if she gets sick, her father won't give her lessons. But the doctor decides to quietly introduce himself. He's the Weaver's family doctor, Jalen Brown, but Arya can just call him Jalen. The girl's tension doesn't subside. Upon hearing the family's last name, she realizes she is in the Weaver home. That's also how she says her name. The doctor says he is very glad to meet her and asks if he can examine the young lady. After calming down a bit, the girl asks Jalen how long she's been sleeping, to which he says it's been over 10 days. The doctor reminds Ariadne that it is not advisable to move now, but she did not listen to him. She thought of her father, who must be worried about her by now. Arya doesn't stop fidgeting, but still raises her left hand for the doctor. The one clarifies if she is right-handed. The girl agrees, and then the doctor begins the examination, promising to do it quickly. The doctor asks his son Solon if he noticed Ariadne's fright, to which the latter thought it was just fatigue. He also mentions that the Grand Mage's granddaughter hated doctors as a child. But Jalen suspects something amiss, for her fear was not of taking the medicine or the treatment process, but something more. The healer is sure Ariadne has other injuries because, being right-handed, she reflexively pulled her left one out, which means she never showed her right one to the doctors. The doctor mentions the girl's scratched hand, which they discovered when she arrived at the palace, and concludes that she has learned to hide her injuries. Ariadne's uncle wonders who dared to inflict such wounds, to which Jalen gives the obvious answer. It is impossible to inflict wounds all over Arya's body and cause intestinal diseases without the Duke's knowledge. The following speculation sent shivers running down the doctor's skin. Perhaps Ariadne Eldir had been tortured. The healer admits that he thought the Duke and Duchess's marriage was a very happy one, and that with such parents, Arya would be happy too. It was rumored that the Duke did not dote on his wife and daughter, which apparently turned out not to be the case. Suddenly, Solon's son enters the room with the little mistress and asks Lucy to leave the two of them alone. Watching the man escort the servant from the room, the girl guessed he was her uncle. The girl noticed his anger and suggested what would happen if her pregnant mom stayed with her family. But no sooner has Uncle Ernest Weaver approached his niece than she affectionately apologizes for the disturbance and thanks him for his warm welcome. But suddenly Ernest frowns his eyebrows and says that she is acting too mature for her age. Arya, who was not expecting this, started to worry that she had overreacted and her uncle would want to send her home. She apologizes. The man, seated next to his niece, tells her that she has nothing to apologize for, and vice versa, he should do it. The girl listens to Ernest's next words almost with her mouth open. He regrets that he did not know about her condition and promises that he will not let her offend again. The uncle strokes his niece's head. The girl is enchanted by the man's kindness. Toth adds that she can just call him Uncle. Ernest goes on to say that this is her room from now on, and she can stay out of it as long as she wants. Puzzled, the girl asks again, to which the man apologizes that the room is prepared too simply for such a gorgeous guest. But here the girl says the opposite. She likes everything very much. Her last room was much smaller and had no windows. His daughter's last words made Ernest think. In the background, he also recalls his niece's garish clothes, her countless wounds on her body. The man concludes that Ariadne has not at all lived the luxurious life of an ordinary princess before, which makes him angry with the Duke. At this point, without noticing it himself, Ernest begins to show his spiritual power. This power casts a chill over the girl. She recalls that her uncle is an elemental knight, and this is what his power looks like. Ariadne had read about it in the novel, but seeing and feeling such magic was completely different. The girl is starting to get cold. She does not understand the reason for her uncle's brooding, for it is in such a state that a knight's spiritual power usually bursts forth. Shaking off his head, the uncle returned to his conversation with his niece. He's glad she likes the room. Ernest covers the girl with a blanket and says she needs to lie down to get better. But Arya is in no hurry to settle down. She is tormented by the question she asks the man. Why doesn't he ask her anything? Ernest replies with a smile on his face that he doesn't want to stir up her bad memories, and that she can talk about everything when she's ready. The girl looked at her uncle's departing footsteps and did not understand why it was so simple, for in the novel, he and Sir Weaver were not indifferent either. She assumes they're partial because of her blood and decides to find out what family is first. Remembering her father, Ariadne argues that family is an illusion where everyone will love you out of blood ties. The girl falls into sadness because she realizes that the same thing is happening in her past life and in this one. And no matter how much she suffers, the Duke will not give her up. Next, the girl remembers the elixir Glomus, which can purify the body and make anyone an elementalist. The snag is, you can't get it without Ariadne. That's why the Duke needs his daughter so badly. As she drifts off to sleep, the girl realizes that she must rely only on herself, setting aside sympathy and conscience. Aria's falling asleep. The dreams take Ariadne to a library where, among stacks of books, one little girl is reading. Suddenly she, noticing Aria, holds out her hand and, smiling radiantly, beckons her to follow her. Aria and this girl, surrounded by books, are welcomed as longtime acquaintances. An unfazed Ariadne wonders to her friend if she's been waiting for her for a long time. The lady, in turn, not seeing a smile on her face, asks if she is sick and if the last lesson was difficult for her. Aria replies with a chuckle that if she were sick, she wouldn't come to this library. The girl who is so excited about the arrival of the Duke's daughter is the guardian spirit of the library. Her name is P. Aria suggests that Pi was born with the library. She could read, but she couldn't speak. But thanks to the lessons the princess gave her, she learned to pronounce some words. Ariadne also suggests that she took all of her memories from her past life. And since she didn't have a name, the girl made up her own, using the number pi. Aria admits that her body endured unbearable pain during the special classes, but she was able to hold out thanks to P, who was always happy to see her. Patting her friend on the head, the princess asks if she took good care of the things she gave her. P says she stashed them well, after which she ran to get them at Aria's request. These things turn out to be 2 vials of yellow and red liquid, which end up in Ariadne's hands. While looking at the potions, Aria notices that the library is a reliable hiding place, and was able to carry these bottles away shamelessly when she was running away from her father. Time passes. The girl in Lucy's company listens to Lucy comfort her that she is glad of her recovery and the fact that she can dine with Sir. The servant then switches to the princess's appearance and apologizes, saying she picked up something too old, to which Aria says it's fine. A girl twirls around at the mirror with a dress that was probably her mom's baby dress. Accompanied by a servant, Aria feels strange wearing her mother's dress and walking down the stairs her mother used to run up as a child. She recognizes the fact that in both this life and her past life, she lost her mother very early in life, which saddens her. At last, Lucy brings the princess to Uncle Ernest, who, on seeing his niece, is more gloomy than a cloud. The man staggered onward, promising that he would hire a seamstress to sew new dresses. The girl was frightened and thought he didn't like the look of her mom's dress on her and herself, who didn't look a bit like her mom. But the reality turned out to be quite different. Her uncle could barely hold back tears at the beauty of her dress and greatly admired how it suited her. Walking over to the table, the uncle reflects that essentially the father was sparing even good clothes for his daughter and decides that he will give her the best himself. While pondering which fur would suit her better, Ernest notices his niece, who is seated at the other end of the table, where her face can't even be seen. He rudely orders Aria's seat to be moved closer to him. The servants immediately carry out the order. The girl, who is wary because of her uncle's anger, moves closer and begins her meal. Chewing her food, the girl thinks about not making trouble and the fact that they will have to talk about something in the future. Ernest, watching his niece, enters in delight at how nicely she can eat. Suddenly, the servant reminds the master to keep his cool and take it easy. The man relaxes and agrees with the servant. It is not worth overburdening Ariadne. He will protect her health at all costs, becoming like a hero to her. But Ernest had become so immersed in his fantasies that the emotion on his face had turned eerily terrifying. This startled the girl greatly, which the servant tries to remedy by whispering the words to her uncle. Ariadne is distracted by another servant who smiles gently at her and brings her a second course. At this point, the girl looks around and notices that absolutely all the servants are smiling at her. She compares them to the workers in her palace and realizes that only the Duke smiled at her there. Aria is doused with sadness again. As she looks back on her past life, she realizes that no one smiled at her sincerely and no one pitied her. The girl has lost her appetite. She puts the spoon down with thoughts that she doesn't want to go home and she needs to close the deal soon. With a look of seriousness on her face, she addresses her uncle that she has something to show him and it is very important. But Ernest almost missed her words, worrying more about whether she had eaten well and kindly wiping her lips with a napkin. The tarnished girl apologizes for not observing the rules of etiquette properly. The man laughs in response. She has nothing to apologize for. After all, she's 7, not 17, and that's fine. Arya, terrified that she is about to be thrown out of the palace, decides to act. She asks her uncle to summon the Grand Wizard. When asked why, she says she's going to tell him what her father did to her. Ernest went to meet the girl. He asks the servant to call Solanne's grandfather to him, but the man politely reminds the lord that the mage hasn't left the West Tower in days. Remembering the old man's stubbornness, Ernest sets a fake condition that if he doesn't show up immediately, he'll send Arya home. The servant went to run the errand. 5 minutes later, Ernest's joke has gotten Solanne so emotional that he bursts into the room, kicking the door open with his foot. The Grand Mage grabs his son by the collar and threatens that he might die at his hands, to which Ernest doesn't even seem surprised. Suddenly Solon notices Ariadne, who has been watching them the whole time, and cools down. The magician's son, taking advantage of his silence, decides to vent his frustration at him for always hiding in his tower and not seeing his granddaughter. Arya decides that Solon isn't visiting her because he's disgusted by her, so she apologizes and admits that she has something she wants to tell him. But no sooner had the Grand Mage felt sorry for Arya than he noticed a mysterious vial of liquid in her hand. The girl who crouched across from the men with 2 vials of liquids in her hands says she's about to show them how to get rid of the contaminants. The moment Arya opened the vial of red liquid, the hands of the old man and his son instantly reached out to her, begging her not to. But she ignored them. With complete equanimity on her face, the princess poured the liquid on her arm, making her skin redden like a burn. Solon and Ernest were horrified. The latter, with sword in hand, was already thinking that it was better to cut off the girl's arm sooner rather than later, lest the contamination contaminate the whole body. Suddenly, Arya says with the same calmness that there's nothing to worry about, she's not going to die. She pours a yellow liquid from another vial onto her arm, after which all the wounds on her skin are cured. There is a look of surprise on the men's faces. The girl adds that it is a special elixir that gets rid of impurities. Ariadne eventually admits that this is the experiment the Duke was conducting on her. The grandfather rushes to examine the girl's palm, and Ernest interrogates his niece, for he cannot believe it. The girl tells the truth, which makes him drop his sword on the floor. Her father injected her with an essence, and then an elixir, and watched it happen. Arya brings the scars on her arm as proof. In the background, Ernest recalls his conversation with the healer, who had already allowed for the possibility that she was infected with poison. The uncle realizes that if this does turn out to be the case, Ariadne won't have long to live. He learns from his niece that the Duke has been experimenting on her since she was 4 years old. At that age, he learned of her good compatibility with the elements. Arya gives the saddened grandfather a jar of elixir in exchange for saving her, and if he heeds her request, promises to make a new one. Solon interjects to her granddaughter, and the latter compliments that this one is like poison and no one but her can withstand it. The girl says the making process is complicated, but she can do it if she has the right ingredients. Ariadne repeats the condition. They must protect her until she is an adult. Says he doesn't want to go back to Eldir. The men fell silent, feeling a weight of guilt for what Ari had to endure. The girl stammered, hearing silence in response. She decides to talk about the benefits in their direction if they leave her. Ernest takes the essence from Arya and asks if all the liquid she has is all of it. The girl doesn't understand the question and says she can show me again how it works. Ernest blurts out an emphatic no. For she had been through terrible things, she was in a lot of pain. Ariadne doesn't understand the reason for their sad faces and expresses understanding that they will have to make a difficult decision, to which the uncle says she has nothing to worry about. He supports his niece but is cut short, then leaves the room. At this moment, already Solon's grandfather, crouched down beside her, turns to the girl. He asks Ariadne if she has feelings of hatred for him, which the princess denies. The Grand Magician adds that he hates himself for not even realizing what was happening to his beloved granddaughter the whole time. The girl says that the grandfather is not guilty because he didn't know about anything, to which he says that he should have guessed. At this time, Ernest is outside the door examining some papers with the butler. Solon says he couldn't consider himself a real grandfather if he didn't know any news from his own granddaughter. Ariadne, meanwhile, recalls an affair in which her grandfather didn't care about her, for which she doesn't understand the sadness on his face. Ernest returns to the couple and shows the document, which is the official contract that he signed. The contract spelled out clauses whereby she could always count on her uncle and grandfather to support her and live in their palace. All she has to do is sign it. The girl notices the space left at the bottom and guesses that's where she needs to write her part of the commitment. Ernest says she can write nothing there, which Aria doesn't understand, because there will be no benefit to them from it. She reminds her uncle about an elixir that could bring them a lot of money. In response, Aria hears words that are very heartwarming. He has no use for the elixir. His goal is to become a real uncle for the girl. Ariadne leaves the room with the contract in hand. There was no trace of her sadness left. With the two of them left alone, the Grand Mage praises his son, that thanks to the contract, Aria will now feel more confident. In response, Ernest asks his father if he noticed the joy of relief in his granddaughter when she signed the contract. Seated across from Solon, the son listens to the mage's recollections of how Aria clung to him with a request in Eldia. Grandfather admits that he has never heard such desperate pleading in his direction in his life and wishes he had come sooner. His thoughts were interrupted by his son's words that he would be preparing for an imminent battle. Re-examining him, Ernest, whose face darkened in an instant, promises to repay the Duke for all Ariadne's sufferings. He goes on to say that he will gather knights quickly, and that the knights of Eldir are nothing compared to their snow leopard knights. Suddenly Solon calls out Ernest in a stern voice. The one, wary, listens to his father. It was only heard from the father that he did not want his son to get involved in politics, which puzzled Ernest. The Grand Magician then asks who he is to him. The one in bewilderment gives the most obvious answer. His father. But Solon says that's not what he means, and as if with fire from his mouth reminds him that he's a former court mage teacher, Grand Mage of the Magic Tower, and now a member of the Imperial Family Consulate. The father arranges a whole exam for his son. When asked who will suffer more if the subjugation of the labyrinth stops, he answers the Empire. When asked where the weavers get their main income from, the son replies that from the kingdom of Duradat. When asked where the Eldir gold mines are, the latter names one place, Garcia. When next asked where is the source of the Luma River that feeds the Eldir, Ernest names Kizelas. And when finally asked what his wife's name is, the son, not understanding what this is about, says Selana Kizelas. Solon scolds his son and asks him if he has not understood his train of thought, to which he replies nothing. While Ernest digests everything she has told him, Grandfather concludes that he can only trust Celie. He promises to take care of Aria and start investigating. The son clarifies if his father is referring to the investigation into the experiments that were conducted on Ariadne. Thoth confirms this and asks to check everything. Also, my father wants me to find out about Gloria's accident. Ernest wants to make an assumption, from which he sinks into memories of his sister. He is reminded of an accident that happened at a horse grave near the Duchy of Eldir last year. Gloria led a team to clean up the place. Her Knights of the Golden Horn should have easily accomplished the task. However, as soon as she was the first to enter it, there were immediate signs of contamination, and she died. Ernest grimly says that's what everyone knows, and asks if his father has noticed anything strange. The one assures that everything is clear, but this essence will be enough to test for poisons. Picking up an empty vial from the floor, Solon says that the amount doesn't matter, the symptoms appear immediately. Staring ominously into the container, Grandfather concludes that it was the Duke who could have stealthily infected Gloria and killed her. Ernest in turn says he's not sure himself, but it's worth checking out the contamination process. As he is about to leave the room, Solon remembers that he forgot to tell his son something. Turning to Ernest again, he sternly says that he forbids him to engage in politics, after which he leaves. Meanwhile, Ariadne is in her room, unable to look at her contract. She didn't even think she would be offered such a thing, and even when it came to the elixir, they didn't behave the way she expected. The girl is pleased that everything went well, and remembers how her grandfather and uncle behaved with her. She wonders if Solon and Ernest's kindness was truly genuine. Aria compares their warm gazes to her mother's gaze that tried to rescue her from the study room. Sorrowful, she hopes that she will one day get to experience a real family. It's been a while. In the garden at the palace fly the red petals of the roses that have sprouted there. Ariadne, while in her uncle's arms, says she can walk and he may not carry her. But Ernest doesn't think to let her go and asks her to imagine that she is just on a horse. At first, Aria is alarmed by his joy, for he is very rude to others, but then her uncle turns her thoughts to something else. They come to the greenhouse that Ernest's grandfather built for his grandmother. Walking through it, the man says his grandmother enchanted it so he could walk here as a child. And every time there was a blizzard, they would come here, and when spring came, they would swim in the lake nearby. Suddenly, the girl decides to inform Ernest that a magician has been watching them all along, hiding behind them. Toth says he's aware of it and asks his niece to ignore him. Solon, realizing he had been spotted, decided to run away from the greenhouse before it was too late. Staring out the window at the raging blizzard, Ariadne wonders when it will end. Ernest, plucking a red rosebud, says it will stop when spring comes, and adds that the main character's aunt and cousin will be visiting them as spring arrives. From the novel, the girl recalls her brother's name. Eric Weaver is a brilliant senior archmage and friend of Axel Valentine, the novel's protagonist. She also realizes that this man is needed to change the end of the story because he often argued with the main character. She decides she must gain his trust, so she must prepare the elixir sooner rather than later. The girl is so absorbed in her thoughts that she does not notice the flower that Ernest put near her face. Deciding that the girl is frightened by the arrival of new people, her uncle promises her that they will like her very much. Suddenly, an almost fantastic apparition attracted the attention and gazes of all the servants. Their previously very menacing gentleman smiles as he walks down the hallway with his niece in his arms, who, however, asks to be let go. Her uncle brings the little girl to her room and reminds her to watch out for her health and that she can always count on it. Suddenly, Ernest was called by a servant, and his smile disappeared from his face. He informs the gentleman of a certain guest who has arrived at this late hour. The uncle tells his niece to stay in the room and promises to return soon. The girl was about to close the door, but accidentally overheard what the two men were talking about. Ernest and the servant spoke of an elixir who came unannounced. Upon hearing the last name, the girl panics, assuming her father has come for her. Arya peers at the visiting carriage through the window. She couldn't believe the Duke had come for her so quickly, but she is encouraged by the contract she signed. Thanks to him, the girl hopes everything will be all right. Sir Weaver is kindly introduced to Rictus Belbarda, a girl who holds a special position among the Knights of the Golden Horn. He says with not much admiration on his face that Ta is too modest for an elementalist knight. The girl gives credit to Ernest's powers of observation as the shield of all the North. Thoth takes the time to mutually smile at Rictus and asks if she was tired on the way here. The girl, holding out a letter from the Duke to the man, answering the question, says that she was afraid of getting into trouble because of the blizzard. From the letter, Weaver learns not the best news. The girl's father has sent servants, knights, and doctors from the palace to help the lady. Ernest crumpled up the letter, threw it at the girl's feet, and said there was no need for it. Rictus expresses regret and says that the Duke has ordered them not to move a step away from the lady anyway. The girl asks about Arya's whereabouts, to which her uncle tells them not to worry and to head back. However, she insists on her own. Ernest is starting to get uncomfortable with what's going on, and Rictus says he's acting weird. She begins to suspect Sir Weaver of something wrong, as if there is a special reason why they are forbidden to see the girl. As a result, she suggests that Ernest is holding the girl in confinement, which he flatly denies. Rictus wanted to ask him something else, but after his shout of ending the conversation, the Weaver Knights burst into the room. They grabbed the girl, who shouted promises to Ernest about revenge for Ariadne. Sir, in the meantime, ordered that all the elixir men who remained outside be seized as well and properly greeted according to Weaver tradition. Ariadne, meanwhile, is having a wonderful time with Pi in the Library of Memories. She treated her friend to a sweet, which she enjoyed very much. Arya promises to bring more next time. Next to P, Arya feels at ease. She was frightened when she heard that the men from Eldir had come. While her friend is getting full, the little lady searches the book for information about Eric Weaver. She manages to find the first mention of him in the novel. She reads the text more carefully. At that moment, Pi suddenly grabs Ariadne's hand and yells that she is in danger. She needs to leave immediately. The princess asks if she can see what's going on outside the library, to which she says she can only feel it. In a magical way, Pi forces Ariadne to go back to the real world. The girl wakes up on her bed. She's surprised that her buddy is able to kick her out of space on her own. As she rises from the bed, Arya notices that it's already getting dark outside the window. She doesn't understand why no one woke her up for dinner. Ariadne decided to walk across the room, going over P's strange words of danger in her head. The sudden picture horrified her. The darkness outside her window was caused by the huge shadow of a giant eagle flying directly into her window. The window shatters. An imposing bird and its rider burst into the princess's room. Shielding herself from the shards, the girl notices a familiar symbol on the rider's armor. She realizes that this is the Knight of the Golden Horn, one of those who came after her, but it is not clear for what purpose. He climbs down from his animal and tells Arya that he will rescue her and bring her home. The girl starts to panic. She says she doesn't want to go back to Elder Castle. He didn't expect such an answer and says he'll take her by force in that case, which scares Arya even more. A sudden magical lightning bolt caused the man to pull his hand away from the princess. The great magician appeared in the room. He's furious. How dare he touch his favorite granddaughter? Arya hides behind her grandfather, and the knight, sensing the power of magic, says he doesn't want to fight Selana. Instead, he democratically offers to give him the girl without a fight. Selana says that the man doesn't even realize yet what a mighty power he wields, and offers to let the guy go without loss and without the lady. However, the cunning knight says that the one should not underestimate him either. Suddenly, he tosses up a vial of the very same red liquid, after which he uses the magi to smash it in the air. The essence of pollution poured like rain across the room. The moment the red drops didn't even fall to the floor, the girl, realizing that the essence couldn't be stopped by ordinary magic, stepped in front of her grandfather. But Selana was smarter. He protected his granddaughter from the drops by covering her with the sleeve of his cloak. After advising the brigand to read books with his heroic battles, the Grand Mage decides to attack. The magic lightning hit the bullseye. The knight, not expecting the blow, groaned in pain. But unexpectedly, Selana's enemy, quickly saddling his eagle, cowardly flies away. Once the danger is past, Selana furiously asks his granddaughter rhetorically if she has any sense of fear at all. He yells at Arya for putting herself ahead of him without even thinking about her health. The girl tries to justify her actions. She wouldn't be hurt by such a thing, unlike the mage. But Grandpa insists on doing his own thing. He says there is no way Arya should have defended him. Sitting down on his granddaughter's lap and hugging her warmly, Selana says that the opposite is what he should be doing. The Grand Mage is unable to hold back his tears. He convinces Ariadne not to try to save him anymore and promises to punish him for such behavior. The girl doesn't seem to hear her words, for she feels a rare feeling, warmth in her grandfather's arms. Arya, in her grandfather's arms, walks down the palace corridor. Selana says she has nothing to worry about and can rest assured of her nasty uncle's strength. The mage tells Ariadne that they have done to the elder guests in the best weaver tradition. Upon inquiring about these traditions, the girl learns their essence. Ernest maimed all but one of the Duke's envoys so that someone could carry the wounded home. Not expecting such a good turn of events, the girl asks her grandfather if everything is going to be okay, which he cheerfully confirms. Arya recalls that the novel says that the Eldir are a very powerful and wealthy family. She begins to worry about the consequences. She warns her grandfather that her dad will be very angry, which the man doesn't care about at all. He decides to explain to his granddaughter, "The Eldir family is just a little richer, that's all." Walking further along the corridor, Arya remembers that Eric's father is rarely seen in the novel. She had even imagined that the Weaver family was so powerful. On their way, they meet Ernest, whom the grandfather immediately piles on with remarks about how he could have let those rats into the estate. Already tired of his son's foolishness, the magician says he can't wait for his wife Selana to return. Ernest complains that he trusts her more than his son. Twirling his finger in front of him, Grandpa Selana asks his son if he ever beat his wife. The Grand Mage reminds Ernest that he has fought her 289 times and always on the losing end. He's pissed off at his grandfather's words. The man makes excuses that it's all out of his character, and if he wants to, he can easily defeat her. He reached his hand toward the girl, hoping to pet her, but Selana yanked it away. Ernest just wanted to take Arya in his arms, but his grandfather wouldn't let him, for he walks with her all the time. Grandpa reminds his granddaughter not to worry about them, and says that kids like her shouldn't have such sad faces. Selana cheerfully tosses Ariadne up in the air, coaxing her that she just needs to be a kid. However, those words plunged the girl into dark memories where people said she didn't look like a child at all. She also recalls Ernest's words where he reminds her that she is only 7, not 17. Arya realizes that in the novel she is a child who is destined to die anyway. But now that she's remembered her life, she has a small chance at life. Her unwillingness to surrender to death brought forth these memories, so she would not be able to be a mere child. We'll have to proceed with caution. Also, Arya reasons that she is still a child after all, and she will always need people's help and expect their sincerity. The girl admits that she sometimes hates herself for her constant wariness. At this point, she decides to apologize to the men for not acting like a carefree child. But Ernest says she's been through some very unchildlike things, which is why she's acting so grown up. He compliments that her behavior is the fault of the adults, and it's not her fault that her childhood was taken away from her. Selana supports his son. He says they in no way blame her for this. The girl hears words that are amazing to her. Grandpa gets sad when he sees his granddaughter handling everything on her own. She interjects to her grandfather, and he not only confirms but also says that he considers Ariadne part of his family. At that moment, her uncle and grandfather's words sounded so warm to her that she felt she could escape her previous loneliness. In floods of tears, the girl asks the men if she can really trust and count on them. Hugging the little princess, Selana and Ernest give her question absolute consent. The girl starts to roar even harder when she realizes that she could live here forever and just call Selana Grandpa. Choking back tears of joy, the girl finally calls the Grand Mage Grandpa. Ernest, hearing this, also wanted the girl to call him by his marital status. Selana wanted to tease him and leave before the girl said it, and for him. But at the last moment, when they were about to leave, the girl through her tears called out that uncle as well. Meanwhile, things are going badly for Arya's father. He's furious that he can't get his daughter back. But he doesn't think about giving up. With a terrifying smile on his face, the Duke gives his word that he will definitely bring his daughter back. In the middle of a clear winter day, a cheerful Ariadne runs out to Ernest's yard, after which they take up arms. The uncle says it's cold outside and she can wait inside, but the girl says she wants to meet her aunt and brother with him. Suddenly, Arya is swarmed by maids from the palace, either bringing her gloves, worrying about her reddened nose, or offering the lady a heating pad. Lucy worries about her lady not catching a cold and tells Weaver that she needs an eye on her. Ernest, scratching his neck, saw his beautiful niece assembled and decided it was time to go. The servants, as if torn from their hearts, bitterly bade farewell to their princess. The girl thinks they worry too much. Suddenly, Ernest stops and asks Ariadne to take a step back as well. At this moment, the uncle applies his magic power, and after the word blizzard, after which a huge magic leopard appeared in front of them. The girl guesses that this is her uncle's contract animal, which is not to be confused with a regular animal. Shape-wielding magic. Wizards can sometimes contract with spirit animals. Such beasts are intelligent and utilize the power of a great spirit. Watching this miracle, Ariadne wonders if she will ever meet a great spirit in her life. The girl remembered the great guardian spirit of the Weaver family, but at that moment her uncle called her to him. Ernest seated the princess beside him on the leopard, and together they raced toward the gate. As they approach, Ernest says they are about to jump them and reminded the girl to hold on tight. In 2 movements, the leopard deftly climbed to the heights. Uncle is relieved that they made it in time. Looking a little closer, Arya notices an unexplained movement on the road in the distance. The girl recognizes him as the snow leopard knights that ride home on various spirit beasts. The sentinel shouted the return of the conquering squad, whereupon the gate door opened. The leopard has jumped to the ground, where Ernest meets his acquaintance, Veronica Bronte, a snow leopard knight. He notices her untidy appearance and she confesses that she's back in the thick of it. The man makes a remark to her about the blood on her clothes that should have been washed off, to which Veronica replies that she forgot. Suddenly, she notices the child next to Ernest, and he tells her that she is his niece and to be careful what she says. Veronica is surprised because she didn't know he had a niece. Ernest is surprised because he wrote about it in letters. Ariadne Eldir is frightened of Veronica, but the latter, without noticing it, reaches out to meet her, which Ernest forbids her to do. Suddenly, the love of his life, Selana runs up to his uncle and asks if he misses her. Jumping off his leopard, Ernest threw himself into his wife's arms, which is something not everyone likes to see. They are spotted by Eric Weaver, the son of an uncle who is studying to be a magician. He expresses his displeasure that the parents are exchanging affection like newlyweds. His displeasure grew even more when he saw his parents about to kiss. He says, thank God his parents didn't reward him with a brother or sister, as he suddenly notices Ariadne sitting on his dad's leopard. Arya silently stares at Eric and notes that he looks younger for his 16 years than he does in the drawings in the novel. Veronica, noticing the girl's face, grimaces at her, which is misunderstood by Eric. He asks his buddy if Arya is cute just because she's small, which she confirms. Suddenly, Eric says that the princess is disgusting because her huge eyes make him feel like he's looking at a bare skull. Veronica returns his words with a boomerang. She says he's not cute, he's nasty. Eric immediately started proving her otherwise and bragging about herself, to which she still said the same thing she had before. Ernest's son resents that she can't say that about her future Earl, to which Veronica says that if he becomes one, he'll leave here. Her next words sounded like thunder to Eric. He looked like a cow, but Veronica managed to ride away on her horse before Eric could get his revenge on her. He turns his attention to Arya. He doesn't like the way she looks down on him. The girl became agitated when Eric started to say that she had no right to sit on her father's snow leopard. He grabbed Ariadne's arm roughly and tried to throw her off the magical animal. Ernest stops his son's insolent behavior in time, after which he backs away from the little lady. Eric observes a strange picture for himself. His father cares for the hand of a girl he does not know. Noticing a scratch on Arya's arm, Ernest informs his wife that he will return to the palace first. Selana decides to postpone her introduction to her husband's niece. Pulling away with her uncle from Eric, who is scolded by her mother, Arya thought about the fact that he seems even more at ease now than he did in the novel. She thinks about talking to him. After a while, Arya, accompanied by a servant, walks down the corridor who reprimands Eric for misbehaving with the princess. Suddenly, the girl remembers about the night girl Veronica and decides to ask Lucy about her. The servant told her that Veronica and Eric were the same age, and she became a knight at 14. She had appeared in the courtyard 2 years before. They say she's strong beyond her years. Arya compares Veronica to the novel's protagonist, who became a knight at 12, and concludes that she is clearly a genius. However, the girl is tormented by one question: why Veronica is not mentioned anywhere in the novel? She doesn't think she looks like Ariadne from the novel, and assumes she died in the beginning. Arya recalls Veronica and Eric's argument as she sat on top of the leopard. The girl recalls, in the novel, every time Eric got drunk he mumbled the words of this argument. Based on this factor, Ariadne makes the assumption that Veronica is his deceased lover. Since ancient times, labyrinths populated by monsters have appeared everywhere, but the people did not give up and continued to fight. Only one labyrinth that appeared a few decades ago changed everything. It completely wiped out the great empire. Axel Valentine is a ray of hope. He was able to survive the maze and set his sights on destroying it. He created his squad for this mission, which should include 5 people: a witch doctor, a mage, a priest, a witch, and an elemental knight. Almost nothing is written about the roles of priest and knight, as well as about Veronica. But Arya is convinced that she is the talent that will take Knight's place and decides to find out more about her. The princess left her musings when Lucy led her to one room and told her to enter it. In it, Ariadne meets her aunt, Selana Cazellas, who is very excited to meet her. Selana laughed as the Duke's daughter bowed before her, calling her Madame and saying that she could just call her aunt. The girl admits that she didn't get the letter from her husband because it got lost along the way, but she still recognized her niece's story. She praises Arya for her bravery, for even the most trained knights could not have gotten this far. Her aunt's next words pleasantly surprised the princess. Selana says she looks like a warrior, about which the girl interjects in bewilderment. The aunt adds that warriors don't always carry weapons, and a man is considered a warrior when he fights to win. Ernest believes that Arya is as fragile as steel, but Selana, on the contrary, says that her body hides unprecedented power and concludes that her niece is a very strong child. Weaver's wife remembers her son and falls into pity that he is not as good as Ariadne. Unexpectedly, Selana holds out a small gift to the girl, as it was her birthday recently. Inside the box, Arya discovers a small magic lamp. My aunt asks if she's had one before, but Selana had not expected to hear her niece answer in the negative. Watching the cheerful Arya, the girl finds it odd that her parents have never given her a magic lamp until now, which is considered the norm in childhood. Selana helps her niece put her first magic lamp around her neck. Next, patting the girl on the head, she praises her good work and how far she has come. The aunt says that the protagonist will soon get to know her grandfather and uncle better. They often go to her for advice, which she can now do as well. Arya asks her again if she's really going to help her, which she confirms and says it's their little secret. It's been a while. Arya strolls through the garden, thinking about her aunt. She's glad she was able to please her. Looking at the jar of elixir in her hand, the girl concludes that her relatives are good people, and thanks to her grandfather, she was able to finish the elixir. She rather decides to test it out. While looking at the potted flowers, Arya ponders the meaning of being reborn as a child. The girl thinks she's cute, but too much like the Duke. She finds it absurd that the world of the novel she has been reading is real. Arya also reflects on the identity of the author of the novel. Ariadne decides to shake her head and not get any more nonsense in her head. The girl stops to begin her quest to apply the elixir. She needs something small. She finds what she was looking for, Her eye falls on a dried potted plant. Arya approached them, and as she opened the vial of liquid, she recognized the dying plants as daffodils. The princess pours the magic liquid on the plant and watches what happens. Suddenly, the dying daffodils came to life and bloomed in an instant, much to the girl's delight. But Eric, who suddenly appeared from behind, grudgingly inquired what the lady was doing. That made the girl turn around. Ariadne hadn't expected to find him here, for she thought he was in training. Despite this, she bowed affably, calling him brother. But that one wasn't happy with this treatment of the girl, even though his father had told him who Arya was to him. Eric declares that even though she is his cousin, she dare not pretend that they are close. The girl doesn't understand his disrespectful behavior to the child, which is what she asks him about. However, Eric decides not to answer the question and simply chase the little girl out of the garden, for it is no place to play. Ariadne's next words interested him greatly. She says her grandfather let her walk here. Eric's head is visited by bad guesses, after which he furiously asks the girl if she is stealing the secrets of magic from the great magician. Ariadne nonchalantly denies her guilt, while he continues to accuse her of stealing her grandfather's secret techniques. In her thoughts, Arya confirms the words from the novel that becoming a knight is difficult. She doesn't like Eric's behavior, but she still remains polite to him. She decides to admonish Mr. Weaver to be more polite to the Duke's heiress. Eric fell silent when he realized that Arya, though younger, was higher in caste. The girl, meanwhile, tormented him with questions about his rude behavior. Eventually, his patience broke. He shouted for Arya to stop bullying, which caused the latter to grin contentedly. Boiling with anger, Eric scares the girl into telling her father about her behavior, to which the girl repeats that she didn't come here for magic or to become an elemental knight. At the end, Ariadne says she came here for an experiment and leaves Eric alone with a bunch of questions about it. Thoth shouted for the lady to come back and tell about some experiment, but at that moment he noticed the blooming daffodils that were not alive earlier. Left alone, the girl begins to feel bad, for she has moved around too much today. Suddenly, Eric catches up with her and grabs her by the shoulder, asking her what she did with the daffodils. Perplexed, Ariadne turns her head to him, where he notices her nose bleeding and is startled. The girl, wiping away the blood, says she's relatively okay and it's not his fault. Arya wanted to say something else, but unconsciously fell to the ground where Eric caught her. Mr. Weaver notices the girl's elevated temperature and is horrified at the thought that she may now die. The princess regains consciousness in the library, where Pai lays her on a couch and urges her to rest. Arya asks her friend if she forcibly dragged her into the library, to which she replies that she only called her. She marvels at her abilities. The girl wanted to ask how she did it, but did not have time, for she was very tired and fell asleep. Ariadne wakes up in her room surrounded by her family. Ernest can't hold back tears at the fact that his niece has regained consciousness. The healer thanks the girl with the cross around her neck for her work and asks if he can approach the princess. She says yes. Ernest is led away from the girl, and a doctor approaches the girl instead. After examining her arm, the doctor says she is almost well. The doctor adds that Arya can improve her health by practicing sports, but the girl does not notice it, for she feels great lightness in her body. Ernest Weaver heartily embraces the girl with the cross and thanks her for her help. The girl, on the other hand, says it's all nonsense, and everything worked out thanks to a gift from the gods. At that moment, the bright Arya notices the yellow eyes of that girl and remembers that all priests possess yellow eyes. As she looks at the departing, yellow-eyed woman and her uncle, the girl remembers that all eyes of all wielders of divine power turn yellow with age. Ariadne is approached by Selana. She asks her niece if she feels confused, to which she replies yes. Auntie goes on to say that she's been unconscious for 2 days and then asks Arya if she wants to eat. Suddenly, the princess also answers this question in agreement, which made Selana smile, and the servants hurriedly set the table. The joyful atmosphere is interrupted by a doctor who wants to tell Ariadne something very important. Having captured the princess's attention, the doctor voices his assumption. It seems to him that the girl has lost her sense of pain. For Arya, he explains that what is unbearable for ordinary people is like a mosquito bite for her. The girl asked if that was a good thing, to which the doctor replied that it was not. Even though she doesn't feel pain, her body still suffers. The healer reminds her of the incident when Mr. Eric wounded the princess, but she felt nothing, even though the wound was bleeding. He also recalls a case where a lady should have rested before a nosebleed, but she didn't feel the need to. The girl's pain warns of danger, but she doesn't feel it, which is too bad. As a result, the doctor recommends Ariadne to always monitor the condition of her body. The lady agrees, whereupon the man adds that she should feel better by divine power. The girl, hearing the good news, asks if she can now walk anywhere, to which she hears a positive answer. The doctor says goodbye to the patient, and the aunt, stroking Aria's head, congratulates her on her speedy recovery. It's breakfast time. Selana, with a bowl of soup in hand, says her son will consider his behavior. She spoon-feeds the princess and promises to hire her a nightly guard so no one can hurt her. The girl wanted to ask again, but suddenly her aunt invited Veronica Bronte into the room. Selana says that Veronica, though young, is quite strong. She further asks the knight what she will do to Eric if he offends Ariadne again. Veronica, scratching her head, hesitantly replies that she won't let the girl suffer because of him, to which Eric's mother says she can hit him all she wants, just not to break any bones, which shocked the little lady. The girl decides to ask about Eric, whether he was scolded for her fainting. Selana replies that he ran straight to the doctor and admitted that it was all his fault. Aria, that she didn't expect this from her cousin, says it's not really his fault here. Selana says that Eric assumed she would say that, and yet he admitted his guilt, which makes her very happy. After a while, Aria goes about her business in the study. She prepares her homemade elixirs for her grandfather, uncle, and Eric. She has 2 more jars of elixir left, which she decides to give to Veronica and Pi. However, Aria thinks that the vial will be useless to Pi, but she decides to give her such a gift anyway, which makes her very happy. The girl takes off the apron she was working in and remembers that she asked P to find information on Veronica. She hopes her friend will be able to find the information. Taking a seat in the chair, she also decides to ask Pi one day about how she can carry her to the library. With thoughts of her, Aria falls asleep, then is instantly transported to the library of memories. However, she doesn't find Pi beside her, who always runs into her arms as soon as she appears. Suddenly, Ariadne hears her voice coming from behind her and beckons to her. Arriving at the sound, Aria is startled to find Pi, who wants to show her some sort of find of her own, as if coming out of another space. A library buddy cheerfully presents the lady with a book with the information she was looking for. But the princess is interested in something else. She discovers another part of the library that is behind glass. She asks P if she can go through to that part, to which she says yes, and wonders if her friend can't. Pi decides to demonstrate his abilities to the princess. It goes through the glass without any problems and ends up on the other side of the glass. Looking at the glass with interest, Ariadne asked why she hadn't said she could do this before. P climbs out of the glass and says that since she didn't ask what she didn't say. Aria decides that the library behind the wall is someone else's memories and asks her friend if they are different from her library, to which P tells her that she is the only visitor here and there are no other people here but her. In an instant, the library keeper grew sad at her loneliness, to which Aria said she would try to come more often. But in another instant, Pi is radiant with joy and offers the princess a glimpse of the book she has found for her. Reading from the book for information about Veronica, Ariadne's eye falls on an account of a battle in the Lamach labyrinth. The girl recalls that it is a maze located in Weaver's domain. She reads out the document. After the defeat, the defenses were destroyed, causing the monsters to cause significant damage to the city. Veronica Bronte, at the age of 24, died protecting Eric Weaver from a monster called the Blood Hunter. The girl guesses that these events will happen in the future, but something doesn't add up. At this point, Pi says she found all 10 volumes of the novel, but the name doesn't appear there, so she looked in the other books. Aria senses something amiss as her assistant found this not in the main novel, and it's about the present, not upcoming events. Since Pi has access to her entire life with no timeline in the Library of Memories, Aria assumes she has access to any knowledge, which seems like a complete cheat. Noticing the princess's silence, Pi was upset, saying she had brought the wrong thing. But Aria slams the book shut and says it's okay. The keeper of the library rejoices in this. Ariadne then, with a particular seriousness in her voice, asks her for one more request, to find information about Gloria Weaver's death. Pi happily accepts a new assignment from the princess and throws himself into her arms. Suddenly, Aria about her gift, which she holds out to her friend. P is thrilled to notice his name on the ribbon of her first gift. She takes the ribbon off the jar and asks Ariadne to tie it on her head, to which she initially waves it off. But thanks to P. Aries' insistence, she still had to tie her hair with this ribbon, which she really liked. Time passes. Veronica accepts a gift from Aria with a potion she can use when she is injured, for which she thanks her. However, the girl wonders one question: why they, riding her contracted beast, climbed to the roof of the courtyard, because the princess just wanted to meet her brother. Veronica admits that it's a bit of a hassle to go up the stairs to him. Also, the real reason was that she really wanted to hug Ariadne. Suddenly, the knight's horsehoof breaks a tile that falls on his brother's balcony. Noticing the fallen tile, the girl was saddened that Eric was about to complain about it again, which they heard a moment later from an angry guy who had asked Veronica countless times to take the stairs. Eric asked his friend to go down into the rooftops to him, but was scared by a horse that jumped right beside him. The girl nonchalantly asks the young man what he is frightened of, since he himself asked to come down, but that Eric is complaining about her again because she frightened him. Veronica pays no attention to the guy, lowering the little lady from the saddle. At one point, Eric notices Arya, who came to him with the knight, and states how she could have brought this girl with her, calling her a brat. Suddenly, the girl grabs him by the collar, for he dares not call Ariadne skull because of his large eyes. Eric, on the other hand, goes on to say that one for the little lady's nickname is very fitting. Arya wanted to quiet the argument and asked her guard to let her brother go, but she took it too literally and almost threw the offender over the balcony. The girl clarified that Veronica just needed to put him in his place, which left him disgruntled but unharmed. Next, Eric accepts a gift from Arya and clarifies if this is the experiment she was talking about. The princess says he can get the details from his grandfather. Weaver notices his name on the ribbon, which he is very pleased about. Suddenly, Arya decides to apologize to her brother, as she fainted through no fault of his, and he took responsibility. Also, the girl assumes that Eric doesn't hate her, to which the latter flares up again in displeasure. Veronica took the young man sharply by the collar again and reminded him to watch his words. Sir Eric's patience breaks down, and he walks away from the girls. Arya thinks of him as weird, but not that bad. Veronica decides to cheer up the little lady and tells her not to take offense at him and that he doesn't deserve her gifts. But suddenly Ariadne says with a bright smile that she regrets nothing and believes she did the right thing. After a while, the princess spends time with her uncle and aunt at a delicious table in the greenhouse. They marvel at her elixir that can heal all living things. Selana decides to ask her niece if her potion can cure the polluted earth when they clear the maze. Ernest says that the elixir can only heal living entities, but that his wife claims that the soil can also be both living and dead. After Selana's words, Weaver sank into thought, and Arya replied that she didn't know and it would have to be checked out. Arya herself recalls that the elixir on the soil actually works, and when she saw it in the book, the information was very accurate, which is kind of weird. Looking at the potion jar, Ernest says that if the elixir will be effective, it will be worth making more of it. Suddenly, Arya urges that they keep the information about him a secret, or else there will be problems with the temple. In response, the aunt asks the girl how they can distribute the elixir then. Ariadne pitches her idea. They'll start selling it on the black market, and when word spreads about it, they'll publicly donate the recipe to the temple. A snow-white post eagle flies to the window with a letter tied on its paw. A letter about the idea of distributing the elixir on the black market is read by the Grand Mage. He asks for an opinion from the luxuriously dressed young lady that sits next to him on the couch smoking tobacco. This beautiful lady's name is Rebecca Garcia. She is Solon's second child and the owner of the Garcia home. Hey, the princess idea seems good. A few years ago, after the appearance of the Great Labyrinth, the Garcia house grounds disappeared. Rebecca had a hard time finding a new home for Garcia. She is the heiress of a father who is not interested in money and power, so she currently has unimaginable wealth. The girl asks about the money, to which Solon reads her Arya's words from the letter. She claims that if this elixir proves useful to the world, she is willing to give it away without any payment in return. Rebecca wonders if Arya is going to give the potion recipe to the temple, to which her grandfather says she just wants to make it. Arya ponders that by giving the recipe to the temple, we will gain its favor and increase its reputation. It will also manufacture it in large quantities. This will be a new recipe for the temple that will take time to learn. They will easily capture the market. It's hard to buy anything on the black market, and the temple doesn't approve of it, so when they put the elixir on the market, it will be sold like hotcakes. Rebecca guesses that the donation will let everyone know that Arya created the recipe, and the trade will go non-competitive, making a profit. Admiring the girl's genius, she asks her dad about her age, to which Solon wonders why she doesn't know how old his granddaughter is. Rebecca snapped her fingers and called out to Potern, whereupon he dutifully replied that Ariadne had turned 8 this year. Hearing such a small figure in reply, the girl rushed to beg her father to let her see her and make her his successor. Selana answered her with an emphatic refusal, for Ariadne is the direct heir of the Duke of Eldir. Rebecca disappointedly flopped back onto the couch. She says there's no other choice, but she can't give in to the spread of the elixir. Grandpa replies that it's not up to them, and he only came because she called him. Arya makes all the decisions. The girl asks her grandfather about his confidence and says that someone has to take responsibility for it. Solon admits that if Ariadne had been a normal child, he would have said the same thing. But her grandfather began to respect her when she demonstrated on herself the abilities of the essence to gain her protection. Rebecca says it's not surprising since she's Gloria's daughter. Trying to get away from her father, she put all her determination into the moment she poured the contaminated essence on her hand. The girl teases that if Ariadne falls in love, everything will go nowhere, much to Solana's displeasure. Suddenly, Rebecca says that Gloria contacted her shortly before her death, much to her father's surprise. Gloria handed her sister a note with the location and date, which she asked her to keep secret. Solon wonders if she has met with her, to which she says that there was no meeting. Rebecca waited for her all day at the appointed place, but Gloria never showed up. She later learned of her death. The father angrily asks his daughter why she didn't tell him earlier, to which she replies that she kept silent because of his doubts and did her own investigation. The next words threw the Grand Mage into nightmarish despair. The outcome of her investigations were all the same, an accident. Rebecca guesses that Gloria could not tolerate her husband's abuse. If it had come out, there would have been a divorce. She also recalls Solon trying to talk Gloria into getting rid of the baby while he had the chance. And rumor had it that the Duke was a womanizer. He saw his mistresses right after the wedding, but no one believed it. A tear seeps into the Great Mage's eye. He admits that everything that's happened is his fault. Rebecca says she knew her father would behave this way, which is why she didn't talk about the note. Solana thanks her for telling her. The daughter asks her father to stop crying because he should still visit his favorite granddaughter. But Solana says she will go to Arya without him, which raises questions for the girl, since he told her he had finished his business in the capital. Turns out that's not the case. The father holds out a document to his daughter. After reading it, Rebecca guesses that it is a certificate of custody for Ariadne. The girl thought that the Duke had admitted to torturing his daughter, for almost no evidence would challenge his right to paternity. Suddenly, Solana admits that he himself took the document from the Duke's house. Rebecca didn't expect her father to decide to steal the certificate. But the man reassured her, for he had taken permission from the Emperor in exchange for what he would teach some members of the imperial family. Rebecca laughs off the Duke's insignificance and marvels that her father's knowledge could be of such benefit. The girl warily reasons that the situation is very serious and so far so good, but no one knows what will happen next. Rebecca doesn't believe Gloria's death was accidental and suspects the use of a poison that leaves no trace. She assumes that this is the reason Arya wants to donate the elixir to the temple, because if everyone knows about it, the truth will be revealed. Rebecca, getting up from the couch, advised her father to rest in the living room, while she herself would go to visit her brother, because she wanted to see the princess as soon as possible. The girl is amazed that a child under the age of 10 can think this way, so she decides to personally meet the child who came up with this plan. Finding herself already in Weaver's palace, Rebecca is surprised by some words that a servant said to her. What surprised her was that the company along with Arya had decided to go on a picnic.